How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Maye, bringing you guys another episode today on April 10th, a Wednesday, halfway through the week. Another round of topics to get into in the NFL. I'm going to start off with the biggest news probably dropping today, that the Green Bay Packers were officially selected as the team that's going to play the Philadelphia Eagles down in Brazil. I'm going to get more into that and all the details and logistics of all of that. Then I'm going to talk more about the Chargers' game plan around Justin Herbert and how they're molding their identity to be this new, tougher team that Jim Harbaugh wants to implement. Some of his coaches talked more about it, so I'm going to react to some of the things that they said. Later on in the show, I'm going to talk more about Drake Maye and how Merrill Hodge actually commented on what he thought of him. It was pretty harsh. Stick around towards the end of the show to find out what he said, as well as giving you my 2 cents again on the Cowboys this time around Micah Parsons and a rumor that started swirling around the media recently. Pretty ridiculous in my opinion, but regardless of that, I'm going to get into it. All of those stories coming up on today's episode. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Before I jump into the first segment, if you guys have any comments or questions that you want to make during today's live episode, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, with any of those. Using this link, make sure that your question pops up in my chat box right away. I can read it on air, and we can carry on the conversation that way. It's a big help for this show, and we always send you guys a big thank you whenever you guys are able to use the tip and donations link with any of your questions. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I mentioned, the biggest news dropping today, the Packers and the Eagles officially made official today to be the second game of the regular season. Before, there were some talks about it being the Browns or the Packers. Those were really the main two that the NFL wanted to stick with. And there was an incident that happened with the Browns. One of their players, I think it was a defensive tackle, I can't remember his name right now, but he was on a morning show there in Cleveland, and he mentioned, in conversation when they asked him about it, he just said something like, I can't wait to play in Brazil or something like that, or we're getting ready to play in Brazil. People obviously took that and took it as a sign that it's going to be the Browns. They already told the Browns, and he just let it slip out. But nothing was made official. The Packers president, Mark Murphy, also alluded to the fact that they were looking forward to playing in Brazil before the announcement was made. He made a comment saying that people in Brazil, the fan base in Brazil, he said, we're either the first or second most popular team in Brazil. Again, people took that and ran with it as a sign that it could be the Packers as well. Until today, when it was finally made official as that second game of the regular season. The game will take place on Friday, September 6th at Corinthians Arena in Sao Paulo, Brazil. This will be the NFL's first Friday game during the opening week of the season since 1970. That last time it was when the LA Rams hosted the St. Louis Cardinals at the Memorial Coliseum. So over 50 years since this has happened. We never get Friday games just in general during any week, not just the opening week. So again, a very monumental thing that the NFL is doing with this game. And it will be the first official game in South America for the NFL in their history. They will have other games internationally on top of this. The Panthers were announced as an international home team. They're going to be playing in Munich, Germany. The Jaguars, Bears, and the Vikings were all also announced as the home teams when each of them play in London at some point this season. Their opponents have not yet been announced. That will be later discovered when the NFL announces their whole big NFL schedule drop, where they drop everybody the week that they're playing their opponents. Everybody knows their opponents right now, but they don't know how it's going to fall in line with their schedule. Like I mentioned, this will be the second game technically of this new season in 2024. It will start traditionally, as it always does, on Thursday, with the Kansas City Chiefs hosting their opponents. Again, not yet announced who they will be facing first in that week. So that will be the second game on that Friday. And the Eagles will be the designated home team in this environment down in Sao Paulo, Brazil. This, in terms of just the Eagles and the Packers, it's both of their second all-time international games. Philadelphia had their first one back in 2018, and the Green Bay Packers had theirs a little bit more recently in 2022 when they lost to the New York Giants. And now, with all that information I just gave to you guys, my thoughts on it. Initially, when I was looking at it, the Browns, the Packers, who would I have wanted to see? I think they made the right choice here by going with the Green Bay Packers. We could see a better game with them. I know the Browns are very good. They're a very impressive football team. Their defense is all world. Offensively, they got better with Jerry Jeudy. Nick Chubb's going to come back. You have to monitor how he kind of comes back, how he looks after that serious knee injury, but he's still Nick Chubb. I still have confidence in him. Amari Cooper showed that he could still go. David Njoku was a big surprise as well. But even so, I think with the Packers, you get a young, exciting team that not many people know too much about. Same with the Eagles to some extent. You bring in Saquon Barkley, so that was already a good choice by them to say that the Eagles will play in Brazil to kind of draw in that attention of all the stars that they already have. A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Saquon now. That makes sense, and putting them in the game first week of the season against the Green Bay Packers not only is exciting because you have all the big names, but I think it has conference implications, tiebreaker implications that people on the day of Friday, September 6th, might not take it as too serious. People might look at the game and think, this is the first week. We expect the teams to not look sharp. This won't really matter in some aspect down the line when they're trying to get into the playoffs, but you never know the way the NFC is really from top to bottom, how competitive and close it is. Looking back now at it, week 16, week 17, where one of these teams or both of these teams, or in all honesty, neither of these teams is trying to get into the playoffs, say it's close and it's coming down between the two of them, this game is going to be looked upon as much more significant for 6 months down the line than it does, and it will look on Friday, September 6th. So that's another thing that I think just makes sense, rather than playing the Browns where no real implications other than you lose your first game or you win your first game that really matter. And on top of that, now this got me thinking of long-term plans for the NFL and how they want to explore this avenue now, because they're exploring now South America. If you know much about the fan base in South America, it's all about soccer and things like that. They love really just mainly soccer down there. They're crazy about it. And if you can get them to look at the NFL similarly and just be interested in it, I think this game is just that pathway to it. And down the line, you could talk about maybe going elsewhere in South America. Probably only Argentina as the next sort of place that you could really want to explore, to send one of these teams down there. They have the capacity in some of their biggest stadiums. Boca Juniors has a massive stadium there where it holds a ton of people. That could be an idea for them if they want to continue on playing games in South America. River Plate has another one that's a big draw. That's a big place to hold a bunch of fans. If they become fans of the NFL and they want to come watch these games, that's another place they could explore. Then as well in Europe, again, mostly dominated by soccer, but there are venues there that attract a lot of people and hold a lot of people, and I think can bring in these crowds to at least watch and be entertained by these football games. The biggest one that jumps out at me right now is the Santiago Bernabeu. Real Madrid play there. Massive stadium, massive draw in Europe. Exploring that wouldn't be a bad option for them to just grow the game even more because it's slowly getting there. You see the scenes from Germany a bunch of times. If they might not know what's going on in the game, which is fair. It's a fairly new game to them to go and watch and actually know what's happening. But you see them having a good time, consuming beverages there, having a great time, singing along to the songs. Everybody starts singing simultaneously. It's a great environment. Besides the game, the score, whatever team they're rooting for, it's a great environment to just go and explore other fan bases and just see their reactions to the game. The results don't really matter as much, which is a refreshing thing to see in these foreign places where in America and in the United States, a lot of the times we just get bogged down on the results and how teams won or lost, and then we get all caught up on that, where other places just take it more in as a spectacle, don't really mind it, and that's refreshing to see. You always get those videos of fans singing, the crowds being engaged with it. I think from that point, the NFL will just grow more and more. I threw out some places where they could explore if they want to continue to grow it in these areas, but we'll see where they go. Australia could be another cool one, I think, just of that similarity there with rugby and how big of a sport that is over there. Just some ideas that got me thinking after this game was announced, thinking of how this could all go down in South America. There will be, I'm sure, some doubts, some downsides of this, but overall, I think it's a positive thing for the NFL. I think people are going to really like it once they take in the atmosphere, the spectacle that the NFL puts on for all these games. I think they're going to like it. I think it's going to be very well received in South America and other places they decide to grow. I'm excited to see how it is received as well through social media, by watching the game as well. I'm surely going to tune into that game to see how it goes. On top of it being a great game, that extra stuff is really going to be an eye-opener, draw crowds in, watching the game. It's a great thing that the NFL is doing. Hopefully they continue on that path. But in the meantime, that's still months away. We're going to continue on with the show. We're going to go to a quick break right now, and on the other side of it, I'm going to go deeper into the Chargers' game plan, specifically around their offense and around Justin Herbert, how they mainly want to focus on him and trying to get the best out of him heading into 2024. So stick around, a lot more to talk about on today's episode. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here on the show to continue on with our talking points and the segments into the second segment. the Chargers and their revolution, their kind of renaissance of going through this offseason with a new coach, new general manager, and really new roster with all the trades and releases that they had going on in free agency so far. It's going to look like a fairly new Chargers team. And I've pointed it out before. We've had conversations about this before on how the Chargers are going to have a new identity. It's where they're going to try and be more in your face, trying to win the offense, defensive lines. It's one thing saying it, hearing John Harbaugh talk about it, but even still, you don't really know what it's going to look like, what it's going to pan out to be with just Justin Herbert there, with a lack of weapons now, really. You don't really have a clear picture of what this Chargers offense could truly look like. And now more has come out on this story around some of the other coaches on the staff and how they interpret this offense looking, what they have as an idea that they want this to look, what kind of players they want to fit into this team to get the best really out of Justin Herbert, because that's the biggest thing, the main focus on all of this. Their new coaching plan is to try and get Justin Herbert to do less. Really just not rely on him too much. He doesn't have to be Superman, doesn't have to play like Peyton Manning in every game for them to have a chance. They want to avoid that. They want to get more balanced, more dangerous in some aspect if you think of it. If you have multiple players that are a danger to your defense, multiple players that can hurt you, running the ball, passing the ball, different sort of plays, play actions, and stuff like that. That, to me, makes this Chargers team more dangerous and why I'm a big fan of what Jim Harbaugh's doing. And now, recently, you have their tight ends coach, run game coordinator coach, Andy Bischoff, come out and explain their system a little bit more that I think paints a bit more of a clearer picture. He said, in our system of football, do we really need to put him, Justin Herbert, under the most stress on every single down? The answer is no. How do you do that? You have a balanced offense that brings out the greatest strengths in everyone. Still pretty general, but that was his opening statement of what he wanted it to be. Just looking at Justin Herbert so far in his career, in his 4 seasons as the Chargers quarterback, since he was drafted, the Chargers have been 18th, 21st, 30th, and 25th in the NFL in rushing yards. They've been no better than 18th. That's the highest they've been, and I don't think anybody watching or that has considered that elite, game-changing, and really a factor at all, really. If you're 18th, you're not really affecting the defense as much as you would want with your running game. Not to say that they haven't had great players there, with Austin Eckler being their most recent runner. He had great seasons stat-wise. He was one of the best running backs 2 years ago, a year ago. However you view it, this year he suffered with a good amount of injury, so he was in and out of the team. But at one point, he was a very highly touted running back. He did a lot for this team. But even so, with him there, I even think they used him a bit too much. To some extent, they overused him, and now you kind of see the repercussions of that and how injured he was, in and out of the lineup he was. The mileage on him was overused, and he really was almost run into the ground. He's not old, but he is on the older side of a running back on how people view them. So they kind of wore him out and had to be forced to move on from him in this offseason. Now they bring in Gus Edwards, and Jim Harbaugh has repeatedly stressed the run game, tough attitude, as well as their new offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, also marveled at the fact that how special Justin Herbert could even be even more with a running game that gives him better than 18th in the league in production. We're not even asking for too much. That's worse than half of the league in running. If you just climb 4 spots, 6 spots, get close to the top 10, I don't even think you have to be a top 5, top 3 team in terms of running. That's not realistic in this season. If you get to like 10 or 12, I think you could see a big change with this Chargers defense. Now, how do they do that? I mentioned they traded away Austin Eckler. They brought in a bigger, more powerful running back in Gus Edwards. He was in Baltimore's offense, just punishing, 1 or 2 cut max kind of running back, hits the hole hard, doesn't take too long to decide which way he's running, and if he fits through a hole, great, he's off and running. If he doesn't, he's going to hit whoever's in that hole as hard as he can and try to gain those extra tough yards. That's who Gus Edwards is. That's the kind of identity that is portrayed to me when they make a signing like that, compared to Austin Eckler, who's more agile, more finesse, more speed, smaller than Gus Edwards. They're trying to go the opposite way with Gus Edwards compared to Austin Eckler. They also brought in Will Dissly, not a breaking news top 3 sort of move that reaches everybody, that shocks everybody. But again, Will Dissly is another top run game blocker. He excels in run blocking. Sure, he can catch a few passes. It's not like he can't, and he's only in there as another offensive lineman. But again, you bring a guy that can help the running game, can be in there in big packages, stacked packages that gets you those extra yards whenever you need it. Those two guys tell you a bit of where they want to go, what kind of identity they want to have. Then Andy Bishkoff added later on in his sentiment that this offense and this building is an offensive line-centric space. I've been here for 5 weeks, but I can tell you this. This is going to be an O-line-centric building. Everybody else can fall in. That probably paints the clearest picture to me. You know, you either fit into the system, you accept your role, probably run blocking a lot more than maybe some receivers, some tight ends want. And if you have a problem with that, you could move on. They don't need you there. You fit this system, what Greg Roman wants to run, what Andy Bishkoff wants to run, what Jim Harbaugh has in mind. Or it's not going to go well for you. You're not going to enjoy your time here, and that's fine. They could just move on and find somebody else that fits their system. I like that. I really am a fan of Jim Harbaugh and their staff, all just seeming to keep saying the same message over and over again. This tough-minded, run-oriented team, offensive line-oriented team. It's refreshing to see because of the trend that everyone's going now, spread. You look at the Titans, I've talked a lot about them. They're going more spread, bringing in receivers, players that can get you yards in open space, succeed in open space, don't necessarily need to get those extra yards, be tough-minded, offensive line-oriented. They've gone a little bit of a different way. I'm also a fan of that because it's a change. I like seeing teams change their identities a little bit if the same thing's not working, rather than force it to happen, rather than trying new pieces and recording or trying to get the same players to fit a system that just doesn't work. Try and change the system, see if something else works, and that's what the Chargers are now doing with Justin Herbert. Hopefully it works out for them. And just to sort of put a bow on this whole thing, Greg Roman also had a meeting with them with their Phase 1 workouts also starting this week. Yeah, this week they started their workouts, their Phase 1 workouts. And in his meeting, Andy Bishkoff constantly referred to the fact that he used the word epic. He kept using the word epic at their first meeting, specifically emphasizing high point totals, and low turnovers. He said it's of little relevance if it comes through the air or through the ground. The LA Chargers specifically want smart, tough, dependable, vicious players on their team. Very similar and very different words to describe their players, but that's their system. That's what they want to try out. Of course, I say try because, this could, in reality, not work out for them with their personnel that they have right now. But it is refreshing to see. It's already sounding very different from what they had with Justin Herbert. Like I mentioned, even very different than what they had with Phillip Rivers. And in the old days with Phillip Rivers, that he also always used to just always pass, it seemed like. And it was always just pass, rely on Phillip Rivers. The narrative around Phillip Rivers is that he never reached his potential in that 2004 class with Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning. They all, when they were drafted, all seemed to be at the same level in terms of talent and how people viewed them to be successful in the league. Then Eli goes and wins 2 Super Bowls. Ben has success with some Super Bowls as well. And Phillip Rivers just never really got there. He he was definitely talented. He had the arm talent and skills, but once he got to the playoffs, almost never made the playoffs. It just didn't work out. He was close. He was almost there. And you're kind of seeing that with the Chargers a little bit, which is why it makes me even happier to see them trying to change this, because this has been going on for a while now. And this is Justin Herbert's third head coach under his time here with the Los Angeles Chargers. A pretty average record, like I mentioned, 30-32 in the regular season. That's just not going to cut it when you know that Justin Herbert is talented. I think with all the recent results that they've had with Herbert and just missing the playoffs or getting to the playoffs and relinquishing that huge lead that they had on the Jags, it's starting to make people think that Herbert's not that good, when I really don't think that's the case at all. I just think what they've been running, how heavily they've relied on him, I just think doesn't work with Herbert. He needs more help, and not even more help in terms of more receivers, more people to throw to, offensive line, obviously. Just an idea switch, a switch in identity to get something different out of Herbert to maximize this team, even if he doesn't put up the same stats, which would, again, make people think like, oh, he's only getting worse. Looking deeper into the situation, analyzing it actually, and taking the time to do that, you'll see that his passing numbers might be down, his passing touchdowns might be down, but this team could lead into more wins. It pays off better for the team if he does less, and I'm a big fan of that, like I mentioned already. Now, you look at the number 5 pick, it's becoming more interesting. The more I look at it, the more mock drafts that come out, the more I'm convinced that the Vikings are going to trade for this pick, because it makes the most sense the way the Chargers are hyping up the offensive line with all the quotes that I just said. The Vikings have the 11th pick, where I expect the run to start with offensive linemen, all the offensive linemen not named Joe Alt. He's going to be gone in the top 10 most likely, and if he's not, they could draft him at 11. But the more mock drafts I see more people mock or predict this trade to happen, and I really think it's the best situation for the Chargers to still get a great offensive lineman, not be limited to one pick, and then still have that number 23 overall pick that the Vikings got from the Houston Texans. And at number 23, you could still draft a very talented wide receiver if you so choose, or another offensive lineman if you want to do that. Both the offensive line group and the wide receiver positions this year are probably the two deepest in the draft, so that would make the most sense for them. That's probably what I'm hoping for the Chargers to make that trade, because then the Vikings get their quarterback and everybody's happy, right? I'm seeing that more and more be predicted. I'm liking it more and more, and you have to think also that this carries this offensive line emphasis by Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff. I'm sure carries over to the defensive line as well, the trenches area that's always said in terms of football. I'm sure it carries over the same level of importance to the defensive line. You saw them keep Khalil Mack, decide to keep Joey Bosa, falling in line with that idea of winning the trenches, winning up front. I wouldn't be surprised as well if they use maybe the 23 overall pick to get a defensive lineman, a pass rusher of some sorts. That could also work. There's a lot of avenues the Chargers could go with this. I don't think they need a top-end receiver right now, because, quite frankly, I don't think most of them fit. Those top 3 guys don't really fit this sort of system that the Chargers want to run anyway, in my estimation. They're very talented. They're going to need a lot of targets and a lot of receptions just based on who they are as talents, top 3 in the draft at their position. So to me, they don't really fit in there, and I think it doesn't benefit the Chargers to just get one guy that goes away with whatever they were just saying in the quotes that I said. So that's how it's all panning out for the Chargers. They're sort of becoming more clear with their identity, offensive line, potentially defensive line. I'm a fan of it. I want to see how it all works out, because Herbert, as well, the biggest thing, just to close it out, he got hurt a lot this offseason. Last regular season. He took a lot of hits. You saw him struggling with his hand, his finger in a bunch of those games, which cost it. And you don't want this to become a regular thing, him getting hit, him taking all this punishment and still losing the game and still being one of the worst teams in the AFC. So this just all makes sense to me. I like the way Jim Harbaugh's carrying himself with this. And I'm not saying they're going to be a top team in the AFC, even less in the AFC West, but they are trending at least in the right direction. So early on in this point, not a lot of teams can say that when they get a new head coach, new members in the organization, and stuff like that. So I'll leave that there. Big fan of what the Chargers are doing, but we're going to continue on with the show. On the other side of the break, I'm going to go into a rumor that has been starting to come up with Micah Parsons with some of the members in the Cowboys organization, how Micah might be running out their patience a little bit. More on that after the break, on top of me talking about Merrill Hodge and his comments on Drake Maye. Both of those are coming up shortly. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break.
Daily fix of sports talk without having